boldly engaging the mindless propaganda of our time, apparently with reason. This is Rage of the Age.
This is Rage of the Age, and we have with us today the author of Uncorrected, A Good Man's Struggle Against Political Correctness Run Amok. I want to introduce to you today Justin Ist. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Phil.
So I think the book pretty much speaks for itself, what it's written about. Uncorrected as opposed to being politically correct. And of course, the other part of the title states that a good man's struggle against political correctness run amok. Why is this a good man's struggle?
Well, I think that's the key. You know, we all want to be respectful to each other. I think most people are really decent and aren't out to offend or attack others. But, in our society, this political correctness thing, we've seen how far it has gone and how dangerous it could become. And the point is, the main character named Steve, I think of him as kind of a cross between Ryan Reynolds and Forrest Gump. He's kind of that really nice, friendly, fun guy that everybody likes, but there's a part of him that just doesn't have that common sense. He doesn't understand how the world works in some ways. And so he's really struggling when he starts to interact with people as he's trying to get his film made with this kind of woke crowd, this very politically correct cancel culture type of crowd. So it's really his struggle against those people and him trying to adapt and find a way to, at first he tries to make people happy, but over time he sees that, he could do just about any effort he wants. And the situation is going to continuously change in front of him.
So am I to understand that this then is a written work of fiction, but it's talking about an actual topic as it would be received now?
Yes. So it is a satire on our current environment. And it is a work of fiction. It's, about this young filmmaker. And actually the film he's trying to do is an anti-racist film. So it's about society in the 1920s Germany and how they adopted and started to accept this really dark and divisive ideology. But he does it in a funny, satirical way. And of course, these days, you just can't do that. You have to be deathly serious about all these things. And, we've seen Bill Burr and Bill Maher and others get in trouble, recently for the exact same thing. Yes. So, as he's trying to get this film made, at first he says, okay, and he tries to, go along to get along. But he starts to experience this from these people who seem like they just want to look enlightened. They just want to kind of virtue signal. And there's sort of this one-upsmanship of showing how enlightened you are. Right. And these demands on him get worse and worse and worse, no matter how much he capitulates. So we really see the character adapt and try to find a way forward. And again, he's not doing anything or saying anything that any reasonable person would consider racist or sexist or anything like that. It's just he, by a series of events, gets labeled as such. He gets caught up in the media struggle between two presidential candidates, and by a series of events, his name gets put in there. So of course, half the country thinks he's an evil monster. Right. And half the country thinks he's this wonderful guy who walks on water, and the answer is never there, right? The answer is somewhere in the middle, but it's just how our media and society react to people these days, and the truth is often somewhere completely different from what we see out in public.
I see two ironies at work here with what you're talking about. First irony is, of course, and that was probably your intent in the book. He's doing a film, an anti-racist film, a film,
Mhm.
contrary to racism.
Right.
Obviously, using, I guess, the Nazis are a good place to look to get your material for making an anti-racist film, but that ends up becoming, his work becomes something evil because, like you said, they're trying to one up him on their wokeness or enlightenment of well, he becomes a villain for doing it. And the other irony is that though this is a work of fiction, I can so see the potential for reality in our day and time.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, he is he's constantly struggling against this, and we see it every day in real life. Actually, I've had a couple things where people just see the headline of the book, they just see uncorrected.
Mm-hmm.
And I was supposed to be on a television interview. It was a pretty big opportunity and events. But at the last minute, one of the executive producers came in and said, the topic sounds a little too racy, a little too dicey. And it is a little frightening how far we've come in this country, where there's a lot of fear out there, a lot of fear about not saying the right words and so on. And there really isn't a guideline. There's not because it always changes to what essentially what I would kind of call the woke crowd of what they determine. Because the character over time, he starts to realize that it's not so much about not offending others. There are certain people in that ideology where it's really more about control. And there really is a parallel between what this character is trying to do, which is an anti-racist film. There's a line in the book about when people tells them, Blazing Saddles could not be made today.
You're right. It could.
And of course, as this, Forrest Gump type of mentality that, he asks sincerely, well, why not? Yes, there are some offensive terms in there, but that's kind of the point. He's making fun of racism and how racist our society was at a certain time. And that's the point behind what you see in the film. But of course, it's true. When's the last time you saw Blazing Saddles offered on any network, any television at all? It's really hard to see certain films that many of us grew up with.
Right.
They've largely disappeared. It's very hard to find them on places like Netflix and Amazon and all these other venues.
I would even imagine that Forrest Gump probably couldn't be made now.
Right.
The content in that movie, they would be
Sure.
like so against,
Exactly. There really is no limit, and that's a part of it. So the character goes, and over time, we as we kind of go on this adventure with this character, we see him evolve as well. So of course, he's very capitulating. After a while, so one of the things they say is, you can't have an all-white cast in the film. And he says, well, my film's made in 1920s Germany. Like, what am I supposed to do?
How do you sneak that in? I mean,
yeah. So he goes, okay. So after a while, he almost gives up, and he starts to say, okay, you know what? Fine. So pretty soon you see Asian actors walking down the halls as Nazis. for the film. So you see, and pretty soon he literally has, he has black Nazis, he has Asian Nazis, he has all these different things. And there's this one scene that I really like where there's a black actor playing a Nazi officer, and there's another black actor who is the street sweeper. So the street sweeper goes and sweeps, sweeping the street, and he gets some of the dust too close to the officer's shoes. So, of course, the Nazi character is supposed to be a white character, but he's played by a black guy.
Right.
And, the street sweeper is, supposed to actually be a black guy. So the officer says, something derogatory to the guy, hey, you jerk, hey, you bad guy, to him. And the street sweeper breaks character and he says, wait a minute, this is really going to offend people. We can't have a white guy, saying these derogatory terms to a black character. And the other guy looks at him, and remember, in real life, he's black. And he says, hey, fool, does this look like a tan to you? He's like, I'm black. What are you talking about? And the other guy says, no, your character is supposed to be a white guy. So you can't have, even though you're black, you cannot have that white character saying that to a black man. So they kind of go back and forth and, argue and so on. And the guy, finally, they say, well, why don't we just say that your character, the street sweeper, is a white guy? And they say, okay, that works.
I'll tell you what, listening to what you just explained to there, I was picturing in my head how this could so be a great spoof in the vein of Spaceballs that Mel Brooks could make about, everybody has to be a Nazi, but to not offend. That's something he could so pull off in his vein. You couldn't watch that today.
Oh, exactly. If I were to pick a director, it would be Mel Brooks, probably. Yeah,
because he could because I'm picturing like Spaceball. The Nazis would be like the Spaceballs, and like everybody except the white people are the Nazis, but it's against.
Right.
That would so be right up his alley, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I personally, a little bit about me. I come from a very racially mixed family. My wife is Mexican. A lot of my family is it's kind of like, I consider it like 1/3 white, 1/3 Mexican, 1/3 black. I have black cousins, I have black nieces and nephews. So, there's a lot of spoofing and teasing, but the book also does kind of more serious look of how our different races can talk to each other and kind of work together. And really it's all about coming together in the end. And that was kind of the goal, was for to have everybody kind of come together in the end. But, speaking of Mel Brooks, the book kind of does take the producers twist, Mel Brooks, The Producers, where, when the guy kind of gives up and he starts to really go over the top, and they ask for one thing. Okay. He doubles it. He doubles down. So, but the irony is, just like the producers, the woke crowd, they love it. So the joke's on him, because, the more he does this stuff, they say, oh, this is so avant-garde. It's so wonderful.
Yeah. You're way ahead of your time.
Yeah. So he can't win.
Oh my goodness. Well, I guess you're highlighting the real struggle. We can joke with this, and in a way, comedy is often used to mock things that no one wants to openly talk about. It's like that icebreaker to engage topics that people want to kill you over. So we laugh a little bit to kind of open it up a little bit. But it's a real reality now, I think, with the struggle of what you're saying, that go along to get along. There's no guidelines, but that's on purpose, because they want to be able to That's part of the method of control. You don't know the rules that you have to play
Yeah.
by. We can change them on you at any second, which creates an atmosphere of intimidation to where, you basically surrender all creativity and all effort, individual effort, and letting them run the show so as not to offend. And to me, that's by design.
Oh, absolutely. And, there are the book talks about there's a radio personality, and he talks about the different sort of tiers of the people, and the founders of some of these groups. So there's a group called Black Lives Together, or BLT for short. And this and there are other groups that are kind of a spin off of Antifa and so on. And there's a lot of parallels of how the people at the top have a certain ideology and certain goals of what they're trying to do. And that at the top, it's really more about controls, about changing society in a way that is not one that we would call pro-American typically. I try not to use too many of the buzzwords, but I mean, the kind of that Marxist ideology is actually a pretty good description.
Pretty accurate, yeah.
But, when you get down to the individual people who support groups like, let's say it's Black Lives Matter or something like that, they're really good, decent people who just want to, stop racism and help the Black community. That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of tiers in between, and there's a big difference between the ideology and the funding of the sort of the people at the top, the people who are kind of pushing some of these ideologies, and the people who, just hear, oh, hey, there's a group that wants to, help stop racism. And there's such a chasm between the two, and more effective ways to fight racism than supporting groups that really want to tear down institutions that are revered by all, no matter what the color of your skin is, or what sex you are.
And that's the great deception, I think, is when someone has ulterior motives that they can't openly share, they obviously put things in front to, mask what they want to do. I mean, a lot of people, if they put out front, this is what I really want to achieve, nobody would be near them. But they sell things like, we want to end racism. But this is what I don't get, though, the lack of coherency. You want to end racism by instigating racial hatred. You want to end racism by randomly destroying property and setting cities on fire and killing police officers. This is supposed to end racism how, right?
Right.
To me, that's where you might have the mind of, I want to do something about racism, but honestly, you think that's the way to do it? That's where I have a disconnect with them. Seriously.
Right. And that's, I think that's the way people should react. And part of this, part of the book, the more serious side, does go into, what some of the financial motivations. I mean, there are people in that victimization industry, I call it. And there's money to be made behind that.
Yes.
The people who, do books like, white privilege and that kind of thing, they're out at speaking events making a lot of money on this stuff. And I think most reasonable people would call it a lot of what's in there, at minimal, extremely divisive and destructive. And I would argue that there's a lot in there that's downright racist.
Yes.
To me, if you are saying because of the color of your skin, you are inherently privileged or flaws, and your achievements are not your own, that is a very racist ideology.
Right.
And because it's done under this umbrella, and I use political correctness as kind of the larger umbrella and the subsets of that woke ideology and cancel culture and so on. But its language has already really been weaponized. We've seen how the race issue has become weaponized in our culture. And, I think we need to see it as such. And really, every single one of us needs to be involved in the fight, in a sense. We've seen how far this has become, and we've seen even Dr. Seuss, for God's sakes, has been canceled. We've seen really good people for things that they said 20 years ago when it was perfectly acceptable and to say, but somebody now makes a rule, oh, this is insensitive, and now that person is canceled, that they can't make a living anymore. And it just goes to show that, we have to be, I applaud the ideas. There are ways to fight racism without furthering the cancel culture mentality. And we all have to say enough is enough. And there are some good sources out there. On my website, I have a few links to sources out there. It's justinist.com. And there are links in there to sites like one I really like is called fairforall.org. And it's an anti-racism group, but it does it without the this divisiveness, without the cancel culture. And there are links out there. Another one was Counterweight Support. I think they're .com. They might be .org. Where it's actually a site by liberals, classic liberals, who said, we don't want this in our name. We don't want this cancel culture stuff in our name. So they have a lot of template letters of ways that people could respond if your business or your community or school is pushing critical race theory, if they're pushing the 1619 projects, which I believe both of those are pretty racist, if it not least divisive and destructive. And they have template letters of how you can respond in a positive way, but still make it clear that you are against this. And I really believe that all of us at this point, if you do care about the First Amendment, if you are concerned about the way things are going, that we all have to take up the fight a bit.
You're listening to Rage of the Age. Rage of the Age. Politics, religion, economics, and history with a conservative bend.
Yeah, I agree. There has to be taking up a fight. I guess articulating it is probably a hard thing for a group that, let's say, is not used to fighting this way, is now in a fight with people who won't play by the rules, make up the rules the way they go along. And if there's rules, it's ones they've made and they're making you abide by. But again, they don't have to abide by it. You have peaceful people who just want to live and live a good life and pursue what they're looking for in America, which provides that. But now we're facing a group that could care less how they corner you in. You lost a TV interview over the potential of a title, over it might offend somebody. And yet someone has a lecture circuit, like you said, making millions of dollars, talking about how victims are made in this country, but they're doing pretty good. And you have, rich white people condemning rich white people, making millions of dollars, and they're just flourishing. Everybody's towing the line for fear. How do you mobilize and fight? Is a click to a website enough? Is posting on social media enough, or is it about time? I don't know. I'm of the mind maybe we need to start taking off our gloves and start trading blows. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think there are some ways that people. And first, I would say is do not just respond and vent on social media. It's not going to. It may make you feel better, but it's not going to accomplish anything. But I would say, first you could start with your local community. You could, talk to some neighbors. I would, always kind of, it's a sensitive topic, so you have to, proceed a little bit with caution with people. There are some people kind of that out to get you mentality. But you could start with the local community and kind of talk about with neighbors, and that's kind of a start. You could also talk to your local school system and let them know that you don't want this. There's, again, there's some template letters and things that are out there of what other people have done. You could also talk to your city council and so on. Or, of course, I'd be very careful with your employer. That's, people just have to be careful that if these days, if you say the wrong thing, it's hard to believe in America that that's the case, that if you say the wrong thing, and even with the best of intentions, even if you're a good person, you have the threat of losing your job. But there are ways to respond to your employer if they are pushing, if they're talking about racial sensitivity and, hey, let's all be more, sensitive to each other. Okay, great. But if they are pushing these ideologies that have an agenda behind them, like I would say a lot critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and so on, then there are ways out there to respond. And you don't have to start it all from scratch. There's a lot out there on these links and sources where with examples of what people have said and the result that they got.
The whole thing of being sensitive, it really comes down to this is you can't talk because it's sensitive, but then that allows an entire group to do the talking in your place because you might think it's sensitive. At some point, if we don't confront this, it's going to put us into the ground. I fully believe this. If we don't get past it might be it is sensitive. They've made it that way, but they're not worried about being sensitive about it. They're forcing you to be sensitive about it. It's a one-sided discussion. And the whole thing of pushing back at the job, corporations pushing, sensitivity and all this other stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm just old school. Maybe jobs just need to push. Do your job. Don't be a jerk. I mean, that's the basics.
Right.
I don't go to work to make a community. I go to work. I don't want to have all this great hangout sessions or whatever. It's like, I'm tired. I'm going home now. I want to be with my family. I don't understand this whole obsession with the workplace. Just go work. Just work. Don't be a jerk. To me, that should be the poster that sums up everything in the workplace.
Right. And, and also for individuals, like that's I totally agree with you for work. And, for the rest of us, it's what your mom told you was treat others like you want to be treated. Mm-hmm. That should be the bottom line to all this. If we just all went around, let's just treat everybody else like we would want to be treated. And that's good enough. I mean, and of course, if we see, if somebody sees some clear and that's the problem, because I was going to say, if you see racism, then you could confront it. But the problem with all this is that they've redefined what racism is largely. And if everybody's a racist, then nobody's a racist. Right? So, you can't, and it makes it actually tougher for us to fight real racism because there's a group that will kind of take that defense posture of this is probably just, the woke crowd over exerting themselves. Well, there are going to be cases of real racism, right?
Right.
And it makes that battle even tougher. So this is really such a bad ideology all the way around. And there's also a point in the book of how, every decade we got a little better. We were never perfect. We're never going to be perfect. But, you have, Jackie Robinson in the 40s. You have more minorities in the workforce in the 50s and 60s. You have the civil rights movement. You have all these advances over time. And really, the culmination to me was, the country elected the first Black president. And it wasn't, to me, it wasn't so much in spite of his, because remember, at the time, he did not have a lot of experience. Even 17% of Republicans voted for Barack Obama the first time around. He was largely, a lot of people voted for him because they wanted to have that first Black president. And it wasn't despite the race. And to me, that was a real opportunity for the country to come together and truly become kind of this post-racial. Hey, who cares what color skin we are? Anyone who's taken a DNA test, one of those, DNA things, you see that, there's people have part Asian in them. You have a little bit of, you might have a little bit African, and people have a whole mix. And as a society, even South Carolina has more interracial marriages today, a faster rate of growth than places like California, and everywhere, we're becoming there's so much potential of a united society. And it just goes to show that this kind of stuff is really not needed. We are, again, the goals behind it, we have to be very careful of the agendas behind it.
Yeah, well, I think we were doing really good before the woke people went, rampant. I think cause here's the thing. The ideology now says what? We're a horrible racist nation of white oppressors, yet we elected a Black president. Now, I don't know. My logic is simple. How does that happen? That's like saying South Africa voted in, under apartheid, a Black guy. Yeah, that I wouldn't expect. But so when you try to paint the United States like it's this racist, hellhole, but he elected a Black president, when the majority of the people are white, to me that tells me you're wrong. To me that you're peddling a lie again, because there's money to be made by the division. Mixed marriages are on the rise in a lot of places, and like you said, South Carolina is one of them states that they'll try to paint as like this Confederate redneck racist state. And yet, like you said, there they are, right? I live in an area here where it's about 50-50 roughly mix, and with quite a bit of Latin American descendants here in this area. We get along fine. And and this is an area where it's like, again, could be painted as one of them Confederate places or something, right? And yet I go into restaurants, I see Black men and white men eating together, laughing and having a good old time, and they're greeting each other in the store. That stuff back in my life a few decades ago, that would not have been seen at all.
Right. Yeah, and the problem with this ideology, this woke ideology, is that it doesn't really give credit to the tremendous advances that we've made as a society. And and even Martin Luther King, even some of his statues were desecrated, and had things like BLM and stuff written on it and so on. And his message, and this one that I really admire, it is not something that people are embracing from this ideology. And it's really a shame, because one thing Martin Luther King did was he really appreciated how we were advancing and how we could move forward together. And that was the key, together. It wasn't, this thing happened, so now, you need to be put in this place and you're going to do this or else. It was, hey, how can we find ways to get along better and work together and solve these problems? And, to my point earlier about Barack Obama, I really think that was when you saw the woke crowd really rise, because that was a what I call an uh-oh moment. It was like, uh-oh, how are we going to keep this this message, this narrative that America is institutionally, fundamentally, systemically racist? If this just happened. So then and that's when really you started to see a lot of the words change and a lot of the rules change. Mm-hmm. And what was caused racist was this kind of pivotal moment of, hey, how can we keep this going? How can we keep, get kind of this in that, what I would call kind of that, victimhood institution? How can we keep that going?
The whole issue of mixed race, or like mixed marriages, I don't know. I could see that backfiring on them in a little while, because, and I've dealt with that here where I'm at. You have children, teenagers especially, they're half white, they're half black, and now there's like this tension. Well, you have to side with us, and like, so what? Do I hate half of me? Do I have to hate my mom or my dad because they were white, and I have to, denounce who I'm both? You can't, you're making me choose one. Is my mom oppressive because, she's my mom and white, or my dad or whatever? And it's like, that's an ugly scenario. They only see the world truly in black and white. And that's what's the danger is. It's literally to them black or white. And exactly. You can't have a gray.
And that's, to me, that kind of shows, that's with them. It's not about coming together. It's not about unity and harmony. That's and, right. And where I live, it's very interracially mixed. Again, my kids are half white, half Mexican. And a lot of my friends are, married people of other races. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that, and a lot of the people are conservative where I live. And, it's almost always a white person married to another white person who's telling me, you're insensitive or you're racist or whatever because you say want to limit the border or have like some restrictions on the border.
Right.
And it's the, conservatives of, who are married to other people of a different race who are saying, no, this is nonsense. So it's funny how there's sort of that the soft racism of low expectations is a good phrase of how, I find that kind of, it's more, again, that kind of white person married to another white person saying, oh, well, we're going to help out these people because they can't do it themselves. They can't do it
themselves. That's right.
And it's, okay, I understand the want to help somebody, but it's, depending on the person, and there's always context, right? It depends on the person.
Sure. There's context involved, but I find that idea is pretty generalized amongst said groups. The irony is like recently I have seen much commentary where like a guy in your situation, like with trying to remember the comedian's name. He's married to a black woman, And I saw all kinds of comments. Just because you're married to a black woman doesn't mean you're not a racist.
Right, yeah.
And
Yeah,
I'm like, what? I'm like, what?
Yeah, I just married this person. I really hate them.
I don't like her at all.
But I decided to, dedicate my life and have children with this person. Yeah.
She's just my prop for the stage. It's
right.
I'm like, but this is a real argument. They absolutely refuse to believe that people can move on and not be racist, especially if you're a white person.
Yeah, it's again, there's really, and it just shows how much of an agenda is behind this.
Yeah.
And often unwitting for the people. I sort of feel bad for the people who are just kind of the followers and don't think about it. But that's where I tried to make the book more of a fun satire rather than a serious, argument. Because I think through entertainment and through a bit of fun, we could get that message across. I thought it would be more challenging to get this type of message across if it was, straight laced the whole way. So we try to have a bit of fun in the book.
I think it would be I'm picturing it the way you explain some things. It's good screenplay. I mean, if you made a good comedy, it would definitely speak to what's happening. But it would be definitely a fight to get it not canceled.
Oh, I know. I mean, I imagine, especially this, it's a very hot topic right now. I just imagine it would be, like you said, it could even be a series. Remember there were things like Mad TV back in the day.
Right, yeah.
One of those in living color or something like that.
Yeah.
And, but again, it's such a topic, and that's amazing that there's so much fear, especially in the corporations out there.
Yeah.
Of this type of thing. And, unless, we all try to step up and at least, be willing to talk about, be willing to say, no, there are limits. And, I hope people try to always be respectful of others, because that's the path forward. Just kind of screaming back isn't going to help. I think showing the desire that you do want to fight true racism where it exists, but at the same time, you don't fight racism with racism. And that's what they're doing. They're fighting racism with racism. And the point of the book is that there's a guy who's trying to do a film that's an anti-racist film, and it's a politically correct crowd that shuts it down. So he can't get his anti-racist film made by the people.
And that's the beautiful irony of it all.
Right.
Uncorrected, A Good Man's Struggle Against Political Correctness Run Amok by Justin Ist. Where do we find that?
You can find it on Amazon.com and Kindle. And there are also links as well. I kind of wonder a little bit if Amazon is making it easy to find. It could be a little bit hard to find on Amazon sometimes, but I do have a link on my website at justinist.com and a direct link there to Amazon if you want to get it that way.
Justin, I want to thank you for being with us today. This topic obviously isn't going away. Your book sounds like a very clever way to bring up what we're kind of going through right now. And I appreciate having you on with us today.
Hey, I really appreciate you having me, and anytime. I appreciate it.
You're listening to Rage of the Age. Rage of the Age. Politics, religion, economics, and history with a conservative bend.
Welcome to the essay segment. I really enjoyed the interview with Justin Ist, especially his the satire piece that he'd written about a man who wants to make a movie that's an anti-racist movie against racism, and it ends up being the woke racist crowd who ends up shutting him down, trying to one-up him in the appearance of enlightenment. Now, of course, this is a work of fiction, but let's be honest, its inspiration is not based on empty air. This is not done in a vacuum. this is very realistic stuff that we're looking at. We can laugh to some degree when it is a story that we know to be a work of nonfiction. But when you think hard about it, there's not much nonfiction in it. The story itself is created around characters who may not exist, and the plot, of course, may not be exact in form of an actual event. But you cannot tell me that the potential for something like this is not a reality in our day and age, and it's just absolutely sad. That's what's really sad, is our concepts of reality are really distorted on all kinds of angles. Look, and I believe conservatives sometimes fall for this just as much as liberals, that we don't try to understand what is true anymore. We're on such a slippery standing on anything. It's basically what I want to be true is true. And can you show it? Well, who cares? It's just what I want. And if I get enough people yelling for it in the majority, then it's mine and it's true. Let's take the Dr. Seuss event, for example. And of course, I had written an article about this regarding that event. I am honestly baffled that conservatives fell for that. And I'm going to say it that way because it's almost like I would not put it past the trust that manages Dr. Seuss's stuff, planning it knowing they were going to make major money. So listen to what I'm saying about this for a minute. Of course, he mentioned that Dr. Seuss was canceled. I've seen that phrase used in numerous locations, but the truth is, the Dr. Seuss series is still being sold. They just removed 6 books, all right? And of course, the reason why they removed is, superficial. To that, I concur. It was a bum move. I mean, the guy who wrote them, wrote works against racism. So to call him racist in those works is pretty much slander, in my opinion. It's absolute garbage. And it was a punk move as far as I'm concerned. But here's my thing. As a conservative or, classical liberal guy, which I would call conservative, a true conservative, if a company no longer wants to sell their books, then that's their right to not sell their book. Why are you mad at it? Who cares if the reason's stupid? It's theirs. It's not like an outside entity came in and said, you're no longer allowed to print that book. Then that would be a reason to be upset. But they own the rights to this and decide they no longer want to sell it. What's wrong with that? That you have no real principle in coming against that whatsoever, right? But let's take it a step further. Let's say, though, that for some reason you still believe, well, that was just wrong, and we need to fight back, as the phrase goes, and do something about it. What did you do? All right, a lot of you probably went out there and bought a bunch of Dr. Seuss books. Now, think what you just did. Think honestly what you just did. The same trust that runs the Dr. Seuss name, they are the ones who made the decision not to release those certain books anymore. And out of anger and reaction, how did you fight back? You bought more of their other books and made them richer because you had a knee-jerk reaction in your spending. So if you were trying to fight back and cause pain to your political rival, you did the exact opposite. You made them wealthier and you looked dumber, and you didn't solve anything about the cancel culture problem at all. That was dumb. So first off, we just have to be content with, okay, what is the truth in this matter? When you see the initial flashes of what's happening, get to the heart of the matter. Did that really happen? Is that really what's taking place? Should I really be upset here? And if there is something upsetting, then by all means, go to battle. But if we just knee jerk and buy stuff as a reaction, companies are watching you, right? And it doesn't matter if the company is woke or unwoke or whatever their stance on anything, they're very pragmatic. And if they see a buying trend with suckers who buy stuff, if it's presented in a manner of they're going to take this away and all of a sudden you buy more of it, well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to stage these stunts to where we're removing this from the market. And the next thing you know, you're going to buy up everything left. And they're still going to sell other items. And you just made them richer. And you didn't prove nothing whatsoever. Knowing what is true matters. Absolutely matters. If you're going to fall on your sword, at least let it be for a good reason and a good cause. My goodness. But some of the other things we talked about in this interview, well, it's really hitting us hard as a nation. And mainly this is how races relate to one another. It's a tragedy. And I was thinking about this long for a few days now before I had to put this together, and I was realizing that my age group and older will obviously see things in a different light, perhaps, than say those who are 20 or younger. Maybe some enter their 30s, right? The current philosophies of how to view race, they're not being peddled to people like me. They're not being peddled even to maybe even people in their 30s. It's not an easy sale, but they are selling it to those who are 20 and younger. And that's always been an attempt, especially those who love the use of propaganda for political power. Those are your target groups, 20 and younger. 20s and younger. Especially the younger you can give them, the better. You feed them every little propaganda morsel you can muster up without any shame, because you intend to mold their minds, steal their youth from them, steal their ability to think, and use it to your purpose. I get it. But I was thinking about that. There are those who are alive now. And, it's coming to set on me. I don't always reflect on, how older I'm getting or anything. But, I'm not old, but I'm not young. I'm kind of in the middle. And I see this trend that's kind of unnerving. So to those who are 20 years old and younger, and of course, not all of them, because many of them, they have a brain on them and they see what's going on. But this is the targeted group. They have not seen the racism that people of my age or maybe a little younger and definitely much older than I have seen. And so when they are told about we need to fight racism, it's like, they really don't even know what you're saying that is being fought against. I recall times, I recall those days, and I am telling you point blank, straight up, that racism was a far greater problem back when I was growing up and into my young adulthood than it is now. I say that with a straight face, and I defy anyone to counter me with actual logic. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Racism was horrible. It was open. It was in your face. People groups hated each other. They avoided each other. They attacked each other. Their language was not exactly nice towards one another. If mixed couples wanted to get together, they got it from both sides. And it was not a pleasant time for race relations. But then I look over the years as I get older, and I see that we get along better. As we've mentioned in the interview, mixed marriages have grown and are on the rise, even in places like South Carolina, which has that typical display of old Confederate state that's just full of rednecks, and all they do is wave Confederate flags, and they're just so racist. Yet they have more mixed couples there than they do in California, which has a larger population, by the way. So who's the more racist, right? But who's going out of their way to prove that everybody's racist, if not, the education system of California, if not the leaders that are over there? Whereas a place like South Carolina and other places that we're so over it. in these places where, we've lived together for long periods of time to where we've learned to adapt to each other. Maybe places in California need to take a note from that or something. And it's sad because in California, I have come to realize over the past year doing many interviews with many from there and who have been involved with events in California, they're frustrated too with what's going on. It's just the Democrats have a super majority and they just flood every stupid agenda they can possibly throw in there without no shame, no concern, no explanation. They can literally do what they want. And I'm sure that's probably why a lot of people have fled that state to go elsewhere. There's more mixed marriages. There's more mixed couples coming together. There's families that are full of black and white, Hispanic children from different, and you know what? People aren't obsessed over it anymore. I'm telling you, 2 or 3 decades ago, that would have been a huge problem. You had a fight on your hand. You were not going to enjoy that relationship. But now it's not even thought of anymore. It's not even a concern anymore. I see blacks and whites and Latinos and Asian all mixed together, interacting, doing things together in a manner that honestly 2 or 3 decades ago you just did not see. And I'm telling you that point blank. We have had more harmony over over my later times of my life than before. That's for sure. But then we keep getting hit with this rhetoric that we are a systematically racist nation. And yet with my own eyes, I have seen the progress. And then you tell me, no, it's just systematically racist. Like no matter what we do, we're just going to be racist. Damned if you damned if you don't, right? And I was thinking about, look, to those who are like 20 something or younger, you might buy into that because you have nothing to compare it to. You haven't yet seen over the decades the changes that many of us have seen. Where we have come from and what we have come to is a drastic difference night and day. It's far better now than it's ever been. But we're just going to suddenly condemn this whole society as racist when we've actually made progress where I guarantee you in other parts of the world, you won't see it. You won't see it. But you see it here. Yet we're inherently wrong just by this system, which has created opportunities for people to get along together and to prosper where everywhere else this don't happen. It's a distortion, but they have nothing to compare it to. And this is a sad reality. I was talking with a gentleman in our area, in my congregation actually, and he was pointing out the history of the lay of the land here. He's like, yeah, that building right there, the KKK used to meet in. And then he pointed at another house. Yeah, that's where Mrs. So-and-so, they attacked her house and they, burnt a cross in her yard. And and he's talking about all these things that happened in his lifetime, and explaining it to me. And I was thinking about that. Of all the people I know around here that are like in their 30s or less, they can't point to me one place where they know the Klan is meeting because they ain't meeting. If they exist, it's in name only, and they're not really doing anything. You can't show me a meeting hall of the Klan anywhere in this area anymore. They can't tell me where so-and-so had a cross burnt or someone was hanged. They can't show. It's not in their memory because that's how long ago it was. But yet that's the targeted crowd being told, hey, racism's everywhere. Now I'm going to close with this thought. Have you noticed that the concept and the definition of racism has drastically changed and been reinvented almost on a weekly basis? You want to know why? Because if you use the traditional means of understanding it, you don't have much example, period. You just don't. And since the younger group that is coming up doesn't have these real life examples like we had at one time, and we can base our decisions on that, they have to literally create this manifestation of racism that does not even exist by using these crazy definitions. Oh, and then they have this caveat. If you argue against it, that proves you're racist. If that's not the dumbest thing, I don't know what is. But the question is, why do they do that? Why purposely fabricate something bigger than it is? Why create a crisis that was actually healing itself? I'll tell you why. Money. These people have a vested interest in making sure that the races hate each other to the very end, to the end of time, because the minute it heals itself, they no longer have the cash cow that they're going on for themselves. We have the co-founder of BLM, Patrice Concollins, who has had recently been discovered, has millions of dollars in real estate, is looking to purchase, even greater number of real estate in the Caribbean somewhere, looking to buy property, if she hasn't already, through a limited liability company on the side that she runs, but it's not in her name. So, it's a tax write-off, doing exactly what she complains, rich white corporations do, which rich white people do, right? She's now learned to do it, okay? She has all these millions of things, and she calls herself a socialist, a Marxist. Now, this is crazy. And to my confusion, USA Today fact checkers go after that and say, that's misleading, and you're trying to say she took that money from BLM. Well, where else did she get it from, man? Okay? She may not have taken, from something else in BLM and used it, but she is rich because of BLM. All right. The side things they try to say, well, she has this going on, this going on. I'm like, I know. You know what it's tied to? Her movement. She has book deals and lecture tours, and she has contracts with like YouTube and other agencies to make quote unquote black content because, she's the one voice that tells you what every black person in America thinks. She's the official authority and you can't contradict her, right? And it's because of her position in BLM, it has brought her this attention and these contracts that made her rich. Now, what does she do? Like any good socialist leader, like any good Marxist leader, they make themselves rich. And when their followers see it, they blame the corporations, they blame capitalism. In this case, they can just blame the white person for keeping them down. Of course, she wasn't kept down. She's doing pretty good in this quote unquote systematically racist country. But don't look at her. She's not at fault. She's fighting for you, from her mansion in the Caribbean. And this isn't just lost on me. It's not like I'm the only one who points this out. Numerous people find this absolutely horrendous. In fact, you have Hawk Newsom, who's the head of the BLM of Greater New York City. He's calling for an investigation. And he has said something to the effect of, I'm going to bring up the quote for you so I get it exact. He says, if you go around calling yourself a socialist, you have to ask how much of her own personal money is going to charitable causes. It's really sad because it makes people doubt the validity of the movement and overlook the fact that it's the people that carry this movement. You know what? He's right. You go around calling yourself a socialist, how much of your money is going to your personal real estate fortune, how much of it is going to these charitable causes that you demand other rich people pay for, right? I guess you're exempt from that, right? Special victim class, you can do what you want. Is that pretty much the approach? That's what it seems like. And Hawk is right. It makes the movement look ridiculous. But you know what? It's a little late to say that because from the very beginning, the movement has looked ridiculous because they have purposely exaggerated reports and have blown out of proportion the vast majority of shootings between a white officer and a black person, ignoring every other circumstances. But one happens and they zoom in and they blow it out of proportion and they mobilize their street cronies and they cause violence and destruction. And he thought that made their movement look legitimate And now this suddenly is an embarrassment. The whole thing is an embarrassment. Why? Because it is trying to instigate a racial hatred that was healing in this country because there's simply big money involved to be made from it.
You've been listening to Rage of the Age. If you loved today's podcast, make sure to leave a review on the media you're listening through. Secure future episodes by heading over to rageoftheage.com and clicking the RSS feed button. Until next time, this has been Rage of the Age.